The Kilmichael Ambush was an ambush near the village of Kilmichael in County Cork on 28 November 1920 carried out by the Irish Republican Army during the Irish War of Independence. 36 local IRA volunteers commanded by Tom Barry killed 17 members of the RIC Auxiliary Division. The Kilmichael Ambush was politically as well as militarily significant. It occurred 1 week after Bloody Sunday, marking a profound escalation in the IRA campaign. Background: the auxiliaries were recruited from former commissioned officers in the British Army. The force was raised in July 1920 and were promoted as a highly trained elite force by the British media. In common with most of their colleagues, the auxiliaries engaged at Kilmichael were World War I veterans. The auxiliaries and the previously introduced black and tans rapidly became highly unpopular in Ireland due to intimidation of the civilian population and arbitrary reprisals after IRA actions, including burnings of businesses and homes, beatings and killings. A week before the Kilmichael Ambush, after IRA assassinations of British intelligence operatives in Dublin on Bloody Sunday, auxiliaries fired on players and spectators at a Gaelic football match in Croke Park, Dublin, killing 14 civilians. The auxiliaries in Cork were based in the town of Macroom, and in November 1920 they carried out a number of raids on the villages in the surrounding area, including Dunmanway, Coppeen and Castletownkenny, to intimidate the local population away from supporting the IRA. They shot dead one civilian, James Lehane, at Ballymakeera on 17 October 1920. In his memoir, Guerrilla Days in Ireland, Tom Barry noted that before Kilmichael the IRA hardly fired a shot at the auxiliaries, which had a very serious effect on the morale of the whole people as well as on the IRA. Barry's assessment was that the West Cork IRA needed a successful action against the auxiliaries in order to be effective. On 21 November, Barry assembled the flying column of 36 riflemen at Clogher. The column had 35 rounds for each rifle as well as a handful of revolvers and 2 Mills bombs. Barry scouted possible ambush sites with volunteer Michael McCarthy on horseback and selected one on the Macroom-Dunmanway Road, on the section between Kilmichael and Glean, which the auxiliaries coming out of Macroom used every day. The flying column marched there on foot and reached the ambush site on the night of 27 November. The IRA volunteers took up positions in the low rocky hills on either side of the road. Unlike most IRA ambush positions, there was no obvious escape route for the guerrillas should the fighting go against them. The ambush. As dusk fell between 4:05 and 4:20 p.m. on 28 November, the ambush took place on a road at Dussa Barray in the townland of Shannicashel, Kilmichael Parish, near Macroom. Just before the auxiliaries in 2 lorries came into view, 2 armed IRA volunteers, responding late to Barry's mobilization order, drove unwittingly into the ambush position in a horse and side car, almost shielding the British forces behind them. Barry managed to avert disaster by directing the car up a side road and out of the way. The auxiliaries' first lorry was persuaded to slow down by the sight of Barry placing himself on the road in front of a concealed command post, wearing an IRA officer's tunic given to him by Paddy O'Brien. The British later claimed Barry was wearing a British uniform. This confusion was part of a ruse by Barry to ensure that his adversaries in both lorries halted beside 2 IRA ambush positions on the north side of the road, where sections 1 and 2 lay concealed. Concealed on the south side of the road was half of section 3, whose instructions were to prevent the enemy taking up positions on that side. The other half was positioned some way off as an insurance group, should a third auxiliary lorry appear. The British later alleged that over 100 IRA fighters were present wearing British uniforms and steel trench helmets. Barry, however, insisted that, excepting himself, the ambush party were in civilian attire, though they used captured British weapons and equipment. The first lorry, containing 9 auxiliaries, slowed almost to a halt close to their intended ambush position, at which point Barry gave the order to fire. He threw a Mills bomb that exploded in the open cab of the first lorry. A savage close-quarter fight ensued between the auxiliaries and a combination of IRA Section 1 and Barry's 3-person command post group. According to Barry's account, some of the British were killed using rifle butts and bayonets in a brutal and bloody encounter. This part of the engagement was over relatively quickly, with all 9 auxiliaries dead or dying. The British later claimed that the dead had been mutilated with axes, although Barry dismissed this as atrocity propaganda. While this part of the fight was going on, a second lorry also containing 9 auxiliaries had driven into the ambush position near to IRA Section 2. This lorry's occupants, at a more advantageous position than auxiliaries in the first lorry because further away from the ambushing group, dismounted to the road and exchanged fire with the IRA, killing Michael McCarthy. Barry then brought the command post soldiers who had completed the attack on the first lorry to bear on this group. Barry claimed these auxiliaries called out to surrender and that some dropped their rifles, but opened fire again with revolvers when 3 IRA men emerged from cover, killing 1 volunteer instantly, Jim O'Sullivan, and mortally wounding Pat Deasy. Barry then said he ordered rapid fire and do not stop until I tell you. Barry stated that he ignored a subsequent attempt by remaining auxiliaries to surrender, and kept his men firing at a range of only 10 yards or less until he believed all the auxiliaries were dead. Barry said of the auxiliaries who tried to surrender a second time, soldiers who had cheated in war deserved to die. Barry referred to this as the auxiliaries' false surrender. Barry's account in 1949 can be compared with other IRA veteran testimony. In 1937, Section 3 Commander Stephen O'Neill gave an account of a false surrender by the auxiliaries, though without using that actual term. O'Neill wrote, "The O.C. Tom Barry, with 3 of the section responsible for the destruction of the 1st Auxiliary lorry, came to our assistance, with the result that the attack was intensified. On being called on to surrender, they signified their intention of doing so, but when we ceased at the O.C.'s command, fire was again opened by the auxiliaries, with fatal results to 2 of our comrades who exposed themselves believing the surrender was genuine. We renewed the attack vigorously and never desisted until the enemy was annihilated." Some Bureau of Military History accounts do not mention a false surrender. For example, Section 3 volunteer Ned Youngs. However, Young stated he was individually pursuing an escaping auxiliary at the point where the false surrender incident took place. Nevertheless, in a later 1970 audio interview, Young reported that other veterans told him afterwards there had been false surrender. Tim Keohane, who claimed controversially in his BMH statement to have participated in the ambush, did describe a false surrender event. He recalled that when Section 2 and the command post group engaged the second lorry, Tom Barry called on the enemy to surrender and some of them put up their hands, but when our party were moving onto the road, the auxiliaries again opened fire. 2 of our men were wounded. Barry stated that 2 of the IRA dead, Pat Deasy and Jim O'Sullivan, were shot after the false surrender, but Keohane recalled that O'Sullivan had been hit earlier, and that Jack Hennessy and John Laudan were wounded after they stood to take the surrender. Ambush veteran Ned Young reported being told afterwards that Laudan bayoneted an auxiliary he believed had surrendered falsely. Hennessy described in his BMH statement an incident in which, after Michael McCarthy was shot dead, He stood and shouted, "Hands up," to an auxiliary who had thrown down his rifle. Hennessy reported the auxiliary then drew his revolver, causing Hennessy to shoot him dead. IRA veterans reported variously that wounded auxiliaries, finished off after the firefight, were killed with close-range shots, blows from rifle butts and bayonet thrusts, details Barry did not include in his account. Some auxiliaries were disarmed and then killed. Jack O'Sullivan, who was present at the ambush, told historian Meada Ryan that after he disarmed an auxiliary, he was walking him up the road as a prisoner when a shot dropped him at his feet. At the conclusion of the fight, it was observed that 2 IRA volunteers, Michael McCarthy and Jim O'Sullivan, were dead and that Pat Deasy was mortally wounded. The IRA fighters thought they had killed all of the auxiliaries. In fact, 2 survived, 1 very badly injured, while another who escaped was later captured and shot dead. Among the 16 British dead on the road at Kilmichael was Colonel Craig, commander of the auxiliaries in Macroom, probably killed at the start of the action by Barry's Mills bomb. The severity of his injuries probably saved the life of auxiliary officer H.F. Ford. He was left for dead at the ambush site with, among other injuries, a bullet wound to his head. Ford was picked up by British forces the following day and taken to hospital in Cork. He was later awarded £10,000 in compensation. The other surviving auxiliary, Cecil Guthrie, was badly wounded but escaped from the ambush site. He asked for help at a nearby house. However, unknown to him, 2 IRA men were staying there. They killed him with his own gun. His body was dumped in Anahala Bog. In 1926, on behalf of the Guthrie family, Kevin O'Higgins, Irish Free State Minister for Home Affairs, interceded with the local IRA, after which Guthrie's remains were interred and buried in the Church of Ireland graveyard at Macroom. Many IRA volunteers were deeply shaken by the severity of the action, referred to by Barry as the bloodiest in Ireland, and some were physically sick. Barry attempted to restore discipline by making him form up and perform drill, before marching away. Barry himself collapsed with severe chest pains on the 3rd of December and was secretly hospitalized in Cork City. It is possible that the ongoing stress of being on the run and commander of the flying column, along with a poor diet as well as the intense combat at Kilmichael, contributed to his illness, diagnosed as heart displacement. Aftermath. The political fallout from the Kilmichael ambush outweighed its military significance. While the British forces in Ireland, over 30,000 strong, could easily absorb 18 casualties, the fact that the IRA had been able to wipe out a whole patrol of elite auxiliaries was for them deeply shocking. The British forces in the West Cork area took their revenge on the local population by burning several houses, shops and barns in Kilmichael, Johnstown and Inchagila, including all of the houses around the ambush site. On the 3rd of December, 3 IRA volunteers were arrested by the British Essex Regiment in Bandon, beaten and killed, and their bodies dumped on the roadside. For the British government, the action at Kilmichael was an indication that the violence in Ireland was escalating. Shortly after the ambush, barriers were placed on either end of Downing Street to protect the Prime Minister's office from IRA attacks. On the 10th of December, as a result of Kilmichael, martial law was declared for the counties of Cork, Kerry, Limerick and Tipperary. The British military now had the power to execute anyone found carrying arms and ammunition, to search houses, impose curfews, try suspects in military rather than civilian courts, and to intern suspects without trial. On the 11th of December, in reprisal for Kilmichael and other IRA actions, the centre of Cork City was burned by auxiliaries, British soldiers and black and tans, and 2 IRA men were assassinated in their beds. In separate proclamations shortly afterwards, the authorities sanctioned official reprisals against suspected Sinn Féin sympathisers, and the use of hostages in military convoys to deter ambushes.